Welcome back to the channel. If you're here late at night looking for a story to drift off to, you're in the right place. Before we begin, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. At exactly 6:04 a.m., the hallway on the 16th floor of the Lanhua residential tower was silent. Most of the residents in the high-rise complex of Yunhai City were still asleep. Morning light filtered faintly through narrow windows at the end of the corridor, casting long, pale reflections across the polished tile floor. The building, usually filled with the sounds of rushing commuters and opening doors by this hour, felt unnervingly still. That was when Mei Xuan, an 8-year-old girl, stepped out of apartment 1607. She was barefoot. She wore a thin cotton nightdress far too light for the early summer morning. Her hair was tangled, her face drained of color. Her small hands trembled as she raised them, hesitated, then knocked gently on the door across the hall. The knocks were weak, almost apologetic. Inside apartment 1609, Mrs. Lin, a 72-year-old widow, stirred awake. At first, she thought she had imagined the sound, but then it came again, soft, uneven, persistent. She shuffled to the door, confused and annoyed, muttering under her breath about careless neighbors. But when she opened it, the irritation vanished instantly. The child standing before her looked as though she had stepped out of a nightmare. Mei Xuan's nightdress was stained. Her face was pale, her eyes wide and unfocused, as if she were staring at something far beyond the hallway walls. Her lips quivered as she tried to speak. "Auntie," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "My mom, he hurt her." Mrs. Lin felt the world tilt beneath her feet. She pulled the child inside, wrapping her arms around her instinctively. Mei Xuan's body was cold. She shook uncontrollably, like a leaf in a storm. Mrs. Lin didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone and called her daughter, then the police. Within minutes, they were standing outside apartment 1607. The door was unlocked. Inside, the scene confirmed everyone's worst fears. The police arrived quickly. The building manager followed. Neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispering in disbelief as officers sealed off the hallway. An ambulance pulled up below, lights flashing silently against the gray morning sky. The victim was identified as Zhao Min, age 33, a single mother, a business owner, and Mei Xuan's entire world. Zhao Min had lived in Yunhai City for nearly 5 years. After her divorce, she had moved into the modest 2-bedroom apartment with her daughter, determined to rebuild her life quietly and independently. She was known in the building as polite but reserved. She smiled often but spoke little about her personal life. Most neighbors knew her as the woman who left early in the morning and returned late in the evening, her daughter sometimes trailing behind her with a backpack and a book. Zhao Min owned a small nail salon in Fengjing Plaza, a busy shopping complex near the city center. The salon was not flashy, but it was popular. Regular customers praised her skill, her patience, and the calm atmosphere she maintained. When Mei Xuan was not in school, she often sat at a small folding table in the corner of the salon, quietly reading or doing homework. Zhao Min believed that even if life was difficult, her daughter deserved stability, warmth, and presence. For a long time, it seemed like she was succeeding. That illusion shattered on the morning of June 2nd. When Zhao Min's parents arrived at the building later that day, they could barely stand. Her mother collapsed in the hallway, sobbing uncontrollably. Her father stood frozen, staring at the door of apartment 1607 as if he could will time backward by sheer force of grief. Their daughter was gone, and their granddaughter had seen everything. Mei Xuan did not speak for hours. She sat wrapped in a blanket at the police station, staring at the floor. A female officer knelt beside her, speaking gently, offering water, offering comfort. Slowly, as the day stretched on and familiar faces surrounded her, the child began to speak. "It was him," she said softly. That single word sent investigators into motion. Who was him? The police began their work immediately. Officers canvassed the building. Surveillance footage from the lobby and surrounding streets was collected. Zhao Min's phone records, financial transactions, and recent contacts were reviewed. The initial focus was obvious: romantic relationships, conflicts, anyone who had been recently close to her. But neighbors offered little insight. Zhao Min kept her private life guarded. No one had seen frequent visitors, no loud arguments, no dramatic scenes in the hallway. What investigators did learn was that Zhao Min had once been in a relationship that ended badly, and that relationship began 2 years ago. In late 2018, Zhao Min was just beginning to feel stable again after her divorce. Her salon was doing well, Mei Xuan had adjusted to school, life was far from perfect, but it was predictable, and predictability felt like peace. It was during a small dinner gathering with friends that she met Li Chen. Li Chen was charming, confident. He spoke easily and laughed often. He dressed well and seemed attentive in a way that felt refreshing after years of emotional distance. He noticed Zhao Min immediately. In the days that followed, he found excuses to visit her salon. He brought flowers. He waited patiently outside after closing hours. He sent messages filled with compliments and promises. Zhao Min was cautious at first. She was a mother before anything else, but loneliness has a way of softening defenses, and Li Chen was persistent without appearing aggressive. Slowly, she allowed herself to believe that perhaps she deserved happiness too. The relationship moved quickly. Li Chen treated Mei Xuan kindly. He brought her small gifts. He spoke gently to her. He presented himself as someone who wanted to be part of their lives, not just Zhao Min's. But there were warning signs. Li Chen never spoke clearly about his job. He always seemed short on money despite expensive habits. He borrowed small amounts at first, always promising to repay them soon. Zhao Min noticed. She hesitated, but she convinced herself that no one was perfect. Then the truth came out. Li Chen was married, and he had children. Zhao Min ended the relationship immediately. She blocked his number. She refused to see him. She told him not to come near her or her daughter again. Li Chen did not accept this. He begged. He cried. He knelt outside her salon one night, drawing attention from passers-by. He promised he would divorce his wife. He swore he would change. Zhao Min resisted for months, but guilt, hope, and manipulation slowly wore her down. When Li Chen finalized his divorce in mid-2019, he returned, claiming that he had sacrificed everything for her, that now, finally, they could be together openly. Against her parents' advice, against her own better judgment, Zhao Min agreed to give him another chance. She believed the worst was behind them. She was wrong. After the divorce, Li Chen changed. He stopped pretending. He made no effort to find stable work. He gambled. He borrowed money repeatedly. When Zhao Min refused, his tone shifted from pleading to resentment. Arguments became frequent. He demanded more. She gave less. Until one day he crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. That was the day Zhao Min decided she was done. She told him to leave. She meant it. Li Chen did not. And that refusal would lead them all towards a tragedy that no one could stop. When Zhao Men ended things with Li Chen for the second time, she believed clarity would finally bring peace. She told him directly, without anger or hesitation, that their relationship was over. She said she wanted nothing more than to raise her daughter quietly and that his presence in their lives had become a source of fear rather than comfort. Li Chen listened in silence. At least, that was how it seemed. He nodded, lowered his head, and said nothing. For a brief moment, Zhao Min allowed herself to believe that he understood, that perhaps, finally, he would leave. But Li Chen was not a man who accepted rejection. He had already lost his marriage, his reputation, and much of his financial stability. In his mind, Zhao Min was the last thing he had not yet lost. Letting go of her felt to him like disappearing entirely. And so he chose obsession instead. At first, his presence was subtle. Zhao Min noticed him standing across the street from her salon late in the evenings. When she looked again, he would be gone. She began receiving messages from unfamiliar numbers. Sometimes there were apologies, sometimes there were accusations, sometimes there was nothing but silence on the other end of the line. She blocked every number. He found new ones. Soon he stopped hiding. Li Chen began showing up at her apartment building at odd hours. He rang the intercom late at night. He waited near the entrance in the mornings. Once, Mei Xuan came home from school pale and shaken, telling her mother that she thought someone had been following her. Zhao Min felt fear settle into her bones. She installed extra locks. She changed her routine. She stopped letting Mei Xuan walk anywhere alone. At night, she double-checked the doors and windows, sometimes sitting awake long after her daughter fell asleep. She tried reasoning with Li Chen. She tried ignoring him. Nothing worked. His messages grew darker. You owe me. You ruined my life. If I can't have you, no one will. The words felt unreal on the screen, like something from a bad drama. But Zhao Min knew better. She had seen how quickly Li Chen's charm turned into rage. She had seen the emptiness behind his apologies. Eventually, she did what she never wanted to do. She called the police. The first time officers came, Li Chen was gone. Zhao Min showed them the messages. She explained the history. She begged them to make him stop. The officers listened, sympathetic but constrained. Without direct threats or physical violence, there was little they could do beyond issuing a warning. They advised her to document everything and to call again if he returned. Li Chen came back the very next night. This time, he was waiting outside her building when the police arrived. He smiled politely. He spoke calmly. He told them it was all a misunderstanding, that he was just trying to retrieve some belongings, that emotions had gotten out of hand. He promised to leave her alone. The officers warned him, and then they left. The moment their car disappeared, Li Chen's smile vanished. You embarrassed me, he said quietly. Zhao Men closed the door and locked it without responding. From that day on, the harassment escalated. Li Chen began tampering with the lights in the hallway near her apartment. He slipped notes under her door. He followed her parents when they visited, sending photos afterward as proof. Zhao Men felt trapped. She feared that involving the police again would only anger him further. She feared that one mistake could put Mei Xuan in danger. The pressure wore her down slowly, relentlessly. When Li Chen demanded money again, threatening to make trouble if she refused, Zhao Mein gave in. She transferred the money, telling herself it was the price of safety. She was wrong. The payment did not satisfy him. It convinced him that he still had control. 2 days before the murder, Zhao Min saw him standing below her apartment building, staring up at her window. He did not wave, he did not shout, he simply stood there, motionless, for nearly an hour. That night, she called the police again. This time, Li Chen was found carrying a knife. The officers detained him briefly. Zhao Min was asked whether she wanted to press charges. She hesitated. She was exhausted. She wanted it to stop. She wanted peace more than punishment. Li Chen apologized again, crying, promising to leave forever if she would just forgive him this once. Against every instinct screaming inside her, Zhao Min agreed not to pursue charges. The officers issued a final warning. They let him go. 2 days later, Zhao Min was dead. On the night of June 1st, Zhao Min and Mei Xuan returned home just before sunset. Cameras later showed them entering the building quietly. Zhao Min held her daughter's hand, unaware that Li Chen was already nearby, watching from a distance. He had been waiting for hours. Li Chen had prepared carefully. He carried tools, spare keys he had made long before, and a plan that had formed in his mind over weeks of resentment and self-pity. He believed Zhao Min had betrayed him. He believed she owed him her life. When darkness fell, he entered the building and hid on the rooftop, waiting for the lights in apartment 1607 to turn off. Inside the apartment, Zhao Min tried to create a sense of normalcy for her daughter. They ate dinner, they talked about school. She smiled when Mei Xuan laughed. Later, as they prepared for bed, they heard unfamiliar sounds. A lighter flicked somewhere nearby, soft footsteps. Mei Xuan's voice trembled when she asked, "Mom, is he here?" Zhao Min checked every room. She locked the bedroom door. She moved a chair against it. She told her daughter everything would be okay, even though she did not believe it herself. She stayed awake long after Mei Xuan fell asleep. At around 5 in the morning, Li Chen used the spare key. When the bedroom door wouldn't open, he lost control. The noise woke them instantly. Mei Xuan clung to her mother as Li Chen forced his way in. Zhao Min stood between them. She shouted for him to leave. He did not listen. What happened next lasted only minutes, but its impact would last a lifetime. Li Chen fled before dawn, taking Zhao Min's phone with him. Mei Xuan waited. She cried silently. And when the apartment became unbearably quiet, she knew her mother was gone. By the time police arrested Li Chen the next afternoon in Haiwan County, 70 kilometers away, the evidence was overwhelming. He confessed. He did not show remorse. He blamed Zhao Min. He blamed debt. He blamed the world. At trial, his family remained silent. Only one relative attempted to offer compensation, which Zhao Min's parents refused. No amount of money could restore what had been taken. The court initially sentenced Li Chen to death with a 2-year reprieve, citing cooperation and confession. Public outrage followed. Zhao Min's parents appealed. They demanded justice, and they did not stop until they received it. Mei Xuan survived, but survival came at a cost. She no longer slept in the dark. She startled at sudden noises. Her grades fell. She withdrew from friends. Some wounds, though invisible, never fully heal, and some shadows follow long after the light is gone. For nearly 5 years after Maya Lawson vanished, the case lived in a strange space between hope and despair. It never went cold, at least not officially, but it drifted. Detectives rotated in and out, leads dried up, tips slowed. To the public, Maya became another name on a long list of missing women. To her family, she was still a daughter, a sister, a mother, frozen in time at 8 months pregnant. Behind the scenes, investigators were quietly rebuilding the case from the ground up. What changed everything was not a single dramatic confession or a sudden discovery, it was patience and records. In late 2021, the Major Crimes Unit in Harbor City formed a small task group to review unsolved cases involving pregnant women. Maya's file stood out immediately. The details were too specific, the timeline too narrow, the emotional stakes too high. Someone, the detectives believed, had panicked, and panic leaves trails. They began where earlier investigations had stalled: digital evidence. Phone records that had once seemed unremarkable were re-examined with updated software. Text messages were reconstructed from backups. Deleted data, once thought unrecoverable, was pulled from cloud storage. Financial records were cross-referenced against cell tower pings. Social media activity was mapped minute by minute. Slowly, a clearer picture began to emerge. The night before Maya disappeared, she had exchanged a series of messages with Jordan Blake. They were not casual, they were tense. The tone escalated quickly. Maya accused Jordan of lying. Jordan accused Maya of threatening to expose him. The final message from Maya was sent just before midnight. It read, "You need to come talk to me. This can't wait." Jordan replied once, "Fine, I'm on my way." That message was never emphasized in the original investigation. At the time, it was brushed aside as inconclusive. Years later, it became pivotal. Cell tower data placed Jordan's phone near Maya's apartment complex shortly after that message was sent. His phone stayed in the area for just under 2 hours. Then it moved east toward the industrial edge of the city, an area known for abandoned warehouses and illegal dumping sites. Investigators noticed something else. Jordan's phone went completely dark for nearly 9 hours after that. No calls, no texts, no data usage. That gap, detectives believed, was not accidental. They looked into Jordan's internet search history from that same period. What they found was deeply unsettling. In the weeks leading up to Maya's disappearance, Jordan had searched for remote construction sites outside Harbor City. He had searched for "how long before a body is discovered" and illegal dumping zones near a river. He had also searched for how to erase phone location data. None of this proved murder on its own, but together it told a story. The task force quietly brought Jordan in for another interview in early January 2022. This time, he was not relaxed. He arrived late, he avoided eye contact, he asked repeatedly whether he needed a lawyer. Detectives did not accuse him outright. They laid out the timeline slowly. They showed him maps, they showed him records, they asked him to explain the phone gap. Jordan said his battery had died. They asked why his phone powered back on miles away from his home. He said he had gone for a drive to clear his head. They asked why his searches included dumping locations. He said he had been watching crime documentaries. The explanations sounded rehearsed, flat, defensive. When detectives asked him directly when he last saw Maya, he hesitated. He said, "It was a few days before she disappeared." The record showed it was hours. That lie was enough. On February 3, 2022, Harbor City Police arrested Jordan Blake. He was charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder, one for Maya Lawson and one for her unborn son. The announcement came early in the morning. News vans lined the street outside the courthouse. Reporters spoke in hushed, urgent tones. Maya's name trended online within hours. For her family, the news was overwhelming. There was relief, there was anger, there was grief that surged back as fresh as it had been the day she vanished. Her mother, Denise Lawson, stood at the press conference with trembling hands. She thanked the detectives. She thanked the community. She said she wished her daughter were here to see this day, but she wasn't. And that absence still hurt the most. Jordan pleaded not guilty. His defense team argued that the case was circumstantial. They emphasized that Maya's body had never been found. They suggested alternate theories. They hinted at unknown individuals. They tried to create doubt. But prosecutors had built a case piece by piece. They presented the argument. They presented the messages. They presented financial records showing Jordan was under significant pressure at the time. His girlfriend had been unaware of the pregnancy. His reputation, his family, his carefully maintained image were all at risk. Witnesses testified about his behavior after Maya disappeared, how he never attended searches, how he never checked on her family, how he avoided questions, how he deleted messages and replaced his phone weeks later. Friends testified about the argument Maya had mentioned, about her fear, about her plans to move forward without Jordan's involvement if necessary. The prosecution did not need a confession. They needed a story that made sense, and this one did. Still, one thing remained missing: Maya herself. Despite multiple searches, despite tips, despite renewed efforts in areas identified through digital evidence, her body has never been recovered. No trace of her or her unborn son has ever been found. That silence lingers like a shadow over the case. Some nights, Denise Lawson lies awake imagining her daughter calling out, still waiting to be found. Other nights, she imagines Maya at peace, somewhere beyond the reach of the world that failed her. The trial is ongoing. Jordan Blake remains in custody, awaiting his fate. If convicted, he faces 2 life sentences. Whether he ever speaks, whether he ever reveals where Maya is, remains uncertain. For now, the story ends without the closure so many crave. But it does not end without accountability. Maya Lawson's name is no longer just a missing poster on a telephone pole. It is a case that refused to be forgotten, a reminder that time does not erase truth, and that even in silence, evidence can speak. Her family continues to honor her. On her birthday, they release balloons. On her daughter's birthday, they light candles. They talk about her. They refuse to let her be reduced to a headline. Because Maya was more than a case. She was a mother, a daughter, a woman with plans. And even without a body, even without answers to every question, her story finally reached the one thing her family had waited for all along. Justice at last began to knock. The announcement came on a gray September morning in 2024, cutting through the usual noise of New York City news cycles. The Manhattan District Attorney's Office released a brief but explosive statement. Lena Zhao, a 34-year-old woman, had pleaded guilty to second-degree murder in a case that had remained unresolved for nearly 3 years. For many, the name meant nothing, but for those who had followed the story since the beginning, it reopened a chapter that never truly closed. A secret affair, a missing man, a trail of money, lies, and manipulation that stretched across state lines, and a woman who for years had managed to disappear in plain sight. The case had begun far from New York, on a quiet stretch of highway in the American Southwest. September 21, 2024, northern Arizona. It was just past 5 in the afternoon when State Trooper Allison Grant noticed the SUV. The vehicle sat awkwardly on the shoulder of Interstate 40, just outside the small town of Winslow. Its hazard lights blinked steadily against the fading sunlight. The road was mostly empty at that hour, long and flat, stretching endlessly toward the desert horizon. At first glance, it looked like any other breakdown. Allison slowed, pulling in behind the vehicle. Inside sat a woman in her early 30s, hands gripping the steering wheel, eyes fixed straight ahead. She appeared tense but composed, no frantic waving, no visible distress. Allison stepped out of her cruiser and approached. The woman rolled down the window just enough to speak. Her English was broken, heavily accented. "My tire," she said, pointing weakly toward the back of the car. "I wait for friend." Allison glanced at the tire. It was indeed flat, the rubber shredded as if it had been driven on too long. "You've been here a while?" Allison asked. The woman nodded. "Friend coming." Allison offered to call roadside assistance or help arrange a tow into town. The woman shook her head quickly, almost too quickly. "No police. I fine." The response was strange, but not unheard of. Some drivers, especially immigrants, were wary of law enforcement. Allison decided not to push. She reminded the woman to stay safe and returned to her patrol car. That should have been the end of it. But 3 hours later, long after the sun had disappeared and the desert air had turned cold, Allison drove the same stretch of road again. The SUV was still there, same position, same blinking hazard lights, and the woman was still inside. This time, Allison felt a knot tighten in her stomach. She pulled over again. "You're still here?" she asked gently. "Is your friend close?" The woman hesitated. Her eyes flicked down to her phone. She unlocked it and turned the screen toward Allison, pointing to a location on a map. "Here," she said. "Can you take me?" Allison's expression changed. The destination was near the southern border. Not a town, not a gas station, just a vague pin dropped close to a known smuggling corridor. That was when Allison knew this was no ordinary roadside stop. She kept her voice calm. "Why don't we figure out a safer option first?" Before the woman could respond, Allison stepped back and radioed in the license plate, following protocol. The reply came almost instantly. "Vehicle is flagged, registered out of Pennsylvania, subject possibly linked to an active homicide investigation in New York." Allison froze. She looked up slowly. The woman stood only a few feet away, and the patrol radio was still on speaker. The woman's face drained of color. She didn't need perfect English to understand what she'd just heard. Her posture shifted, her breathing quickened, her eyes darted toward the driver's door. Allison forced herself to stay composed. She pretended to focus on the tire, kneeling slightly as if inspecting it. "It's getting cold out here," the woman said suddenly, pulling her coat tighter. "I need jacket, in car." Allison stood immediately, blocking the door. "I'll grab it for you," she said firmly. The woman's demeanor changed in an instant. Her voice rose, her hands trembled. "Why you stop me? I do nothing." Cars rushed past, headlights blurring through the darkness. "Stay calm," Allison said. "I just want to help." The woman lunged for the door. That was enough. Allison reached for her radio. "Dispatch, I need backup. Suspect attempting to flee." The woman shoved her hard. The two struggled on the side of the highway, boots scraping against gravel. The woman fought with surprising strength, screaming in her native language, her voice nearly drowned out by passing traffic. A pickup truck slowed. A man jumped out and rushed toward them. Together, they managed to restrain her. When the cuffs clicked shut, the woman collapsed to the ground, shaking. Inside the SUV, officers later found a loaded gun, several fake ID cards, a bundle of cash wrapped in rubber bands, and a smashed cell phone. The woman's name was Lena Zhao, and she had been on the run for almost 3 years. 3 years earlier, New York City. To understand how Lena ended up stranded on a desert highway, investigators had to rewind to a very different life. Lena Zhao arrived in the United States in 2016 on a temporary visitor visa. She was born in a rural town in southeastern China, raised in poverty, and taught from an early age that survival depended on ambition. In New York, she gravitated immediately to Queens, where language barriers mattered less and connections mattered more. She started small, selling flowers, running errands, hosting at nightlife venues. She was smart, observant, and understood how power moved in quiet, informal ways. By 2019, Lena had become a manager at a private entertainment club. Her job was not just to keep customers happy, but to manage relationships, money, and secrets. And that's where she met Daniel Wu. Daniel was younger than her, carefree, well-funded by parents who had built a successful business after immigrating years earlier. He lived comfortably, rarely worrying about consequences. To Lena, Daniel represented more than affection. He represented security, legal status, stability. But Daniel had a secret of his own. He was married, with children. Lena found out months into the relationship. She didn't leave. Instead, she stayed and waited. By the time Daniel realized the relationship was spiraling out of control, Lena was already pregnant. She demanded answers, commitments, money. Daniel stalled, promised nothing, said everything. Arguments became routine. Threats followed. And then in the fall of 2021, Daniel disappeared. When police entered Lena's apartment days later, they found bloodstains, signs of a struggle, and a body hidden beneath blankets. Daniel Wu had been shot once in the head. Lena Zhao was gone. For 3 years, she evaded capture until a flat tire ended everything. And this was only the beginning. When detectives from the Queen's Major Crimes Unit first stepped into Lena Zhao's apartment in October 2021, they already suspected what they were going to find. What they did not expect was how carefully staged the scene appeared, as if someone had taken the time to think through every detail after the violence had already occurred. The apartment sat on the 4th floor of a nondescript building in Flushing. From the outside, it looked like hundreds of others. Inside, the air was thick with a sour, metallic odor that clung to the walls. Officers immediately noticed that the windows were sealed shut despite the warm early autumn weather. Lena's roommate, a woman who worked similar hours in the nightlife industry, stood in the hallway trembling. She told police she hadn't seen Lena in 2 days. The bedroom door had been locked. She assumed Lena was inside, resting. When officers forced the door open, the truth revealed itself. A human shape lay on the bed, wrapped tightly in sheets. Blood had soaked through the mattress, dried, dark, and sticky. The smell confirmed what everyone already knew. Daniel Wu was dead. The medical examiner later determined that he had been shot at close range. The bullet entered the right side of his head, an execution-style wound. There were bruises on his arms and chest, consistent with a struggle. Defensive wounds suggested he had tried, unsuccessfully, to fight back. Time of death was estimated at 24 to 36 hours earlier. There was no sign of Lena Zhao. As detectives began reconstructing the timeline, Lena and Daniel's relationship came under intense scrutiny. Text messages recovered from Daniel's cloud account painted a picture of constant pressure. Lena's tone shifted between affection and threat. One moment she spoke of love and family, the next she demanded money, warning that his wife would learn everything. Investigators learned that Lena had become increasingly desperate in the months leading up to Daniel's death. Her pregnancy limited her ability to work. The pandemic had decimated the nightlife scene. Income dried up, bills piled up. Most critically, her immigration status had become a ticking clock. Daniel was her last viable option. She pushed him relentlessly. Divorce, marriage, financial compensation. Daniel, for his part, tried to keep everyone satisfied and failed at both. He lied to his wife, insisting the affair was over. He lied to Lena, promising help that never materialized. Friends later described him as paralyzed by indecision, hoping the situation would somehow resolve itself. It never did. Security footage from the apartment building's garage provided a crucial breakthrough. On the evening of September 18, 2021, Daniel arrived alone, driving a white luxury sedan registered to a friend. He entered the building at 9:42 p.m. He was never seen leaving. At 6:11 a.m. the following morning, the camera captured a woman wearing a baseball cap and surgical mask exiting the garage. She was driving the same car. Her posture, her walk, her height. It was Lena Zhao. Inside the apartment, investigators found traces of bleach and cleaning products. Blood had been wiped from the floor, but not completely erased. A single spent shell casing was discovered beneath the bed. The gun was gone. So was Daniel's wallet, watch, and phone. To detectives, it was clear. This was not a crime of sudden panic alone. It was followed by deliberate action. Lena did not flee New York randomly. Cell phone records showed she spent the days before the murder making calculated preparations. She searched for weapons. She contacted acquaintances outside the city. She asked questions about border crossings, rental cars, and cash-only transactions. One former coworker told police Lena had openly discussed disappearing. She said if things went bad, she would go somewhere nobody could find her, the coworker recalled. The gun Lena used was later traced to an illegal private sale. She paid more than triple its value. No background checks, no paperwork. That decision alone would later destroy any claim of self-defense. After leaving the apartment, Lena drove Daniel's borrowed car south. She abandoned it in Texas days later after the owner remotely disabled the engine using a GPS app. Inside the vehicle, police found traces of Daniel's blood. From there, Lena relied on favors. One man, later identified but not charged, admitted he rented a vehicle in his own name and gave it to her. She told him she was fleeing abusive gang members. She paid him in cash. He believed her. She drove west, then south, always moving, never staying long enough to be remembered. During the 3 years Lena remained on the run, she did not disappear in the way most fugitives do. She did not hide in basements or remote cabins. She posted online. Under different usernames, she shared photos of expensive meals, manicured nails, and luxury handbags. She avoided faces, cropped reflections, masked locations. To casual viewers, it looked like a woman living freely. Investigators later described it as arrogance mixed with delusion. She believed she was smarter than everyone else, one detective said, that she could control the narrative forever. But she made mistakes. She never learned English beyond basic phrases, limiting her ability to blend in. She paid in cash almost exclusively, drawing attention. She avoided airports, knowing her lack of documentation would expose her. And she kept the gun, the same one she used to kill Daniel Wu. When Lena Zhao was arrested on that stretch of Arizona highway, she said almost nothing. She did not cry. She did not ask about Daniel. She asked only one question: how long? After extradition to New York, prosecutors began laying out their case. It was overwhelming. Digital records, surveillance footage, financial trails, witness testimony, the weapon. Perhaps most damning were Lena's own messages. Saved screenshots revealed threats she believed had been deleted. She had underestimated how permanent digital evidence could be. In early 2024, prosecutors added an additional charge related to the unborn child Lena carried during the crime. The legal arguments were complex and emotionally charged. Behind bars, Lena gave birth months later. The identity of the child's father was never confirmed publicly. By the time her trial date approached, the defense knew the reality. A jury would show little sympathy. In September 2024, Lena Zhao stood in a Manhattan courtroom and pled guilty. She did not explain herself. She did not apologize. She stared forward as the sentence was read. 27 years in prison. The courtroom remained silent. For Daniel Wu's family, there was no relief, no real closure, only the knowledge that the woman responsible would never walk free again. And for investigators, the case served as a grim reminder. Sometimes the most dangerous people are not the ones hiding in shadows. They are the ones who believe they can rewrite reality itself. The courtroom in Lower Manhattan was quiet on the morning Lena Zhao entered her guilty plea. There were no raised voices, no dramatic reactions, no visible emotion from the defendant. It was the kind of silence that settles when everyone present understands that the end has arrived, even if it brings no real sense of closure. Lena wore a plain gray jumpsuit. Her hair was pulled back neatly, her face pale and expressionless. She looked nothing like the woman who once filled social media with images of luxury, confidence, and control. The polished illusion had long since collapsed, replaced by a subdued figure standing alone before the court. An interpreter stood beside her as the judge asked a series of formal questions. Lena answered each one calmly. She confirmed that she understood the charges against her, that she understood the rights she was giving up, and that she was pleading guilty of her own free will. Her voice was steady, almost mechanical. When the judge asked whether she wished to make a statement, Lena shook her head slightly. She said nothing. That silence, more than anything else, would define how the public remembered her. The prosecution then presented the final summary of the case. They walked the court through the timeline that investigators had painstakingly reconstructed. Daniel Wu had gone to Lena's apartment late one evening after yet another argument over money and the pregnancy. He never left. Evidence showed that Lena had shot him at close range. There were no signs of a struggle, no indication of self-defense. The gun had been purchased illegally weeks earlier, and the act itself had been deliberate. After the killing, Lena did not call for help. Instead, she cleaned the scene, wrapped the body, took Daniel's valuables, and fled. Over the next 3 years, she traveled thousands of miles using cash, borrowed vehicles, and false explanations, avoiding detection while authorities searched for her across multiple states. The prosecution emphasized that this was not an impulsive crime driven by panic, but a calculated decision followed by a carefully planned escape. The defense did not dispute these facts. Instead, they focused on Lena's background. They spoke about her upbringing in poverty, her lack of legal status, the fear of deportation, and the psychological pressure she faced during the pandemic. They mentioned her pregnancy and argued that desperation, not cruelty, had driven her actions. The judge listened without interruption. When the sentence was finally delivered, the words fell heavily across the room. Lena Zhao was sentenced to 27 years in state prison. She would not be eligible for parole for decades. Lena showed no visible reaction. She nodded once, quietly, as if confirming something she had already accepted long ago. She did not look back at Daniel's family. Moments later, court officers placed her in handcuffs and led her out of the courtroom. For most people, that would be the last time they ever saw her. For Daniel Wu's family, the verdict brought little comfort. His parents sat silently, their faces marked by exhaustion rather than relief. They had lost their son, and no number of years could change that fact. Daniel's wife gave a brief statement outside the courthouse. Her voice trembled, but she remained composed. He made mistakes, but he did not deserve to die for them. She spoke of their children who would grow up with memories shaped by absence and questions that had no simple answers. She did not speak Lena's name. She did not need to. In the months following the sentencing, experts weighed in on the case. Psychologists noted that Lena did not fit the typical profile of a violent offender. She had no known history of physical violence. What she did exhibit, they said, was a pattern of manipulation and emotional control. Her relationships were transactional. People were valued based on what they could provide: money, stability, security, legal status. When Daniel could no longer offer what she demanded, and when negotiations failed, Lena chose a path that removed uncertainty entirely. The murder was not the result of losing control, but of asserting it. She didn't snap, she made a decision, one expert explained. One of the most troubling aspects of the case was the child Lena gave birth to while in custody. The baby was born months after her arrest, immediately drawing public attention. The identity of the father was never officially confirmed. Daniel's family declined to comment, and DNA results were never released. The child was placed into protective custody shortly after birth. Social workers later revealed that Lena showed little interest in parenting. Visits were rare. Questions were limited to basic health updates. She never asked about the child's future or long-term care. Eventually, contact became infrequent. The child, now growing up far from the headlines, remains an innocent figure in a story shaped by choices made long before they existed. Despite the guilty plea, many questions remain unanswered. Did Lena plan the murder long in advance, or did the decision solidify only when financial demands failed? Did she ever feel remorse or only regret for being caught? Why did she stop on the roadside instead of abandoning the vehicle and disappearing on foot? Lena has never offered answers. She has given no interviews and written no public statements. In prison records, she is described as quiet, compliant, and emotionally distant. She keeps to herself and avoids attention. She acts like someone who already closed the door on the outside world, one correctional officer noted. For law enforcement, the case has become a lesson in how modern fugitives operate. Lena did not rely on fake passports or criminal networks. She relied on ordinary people, cash, and the assumption that no one would look too closely. For nearly 3 years, that strategy worked. If not for a flat tire, a disabled vehicle, and an officer who trusted her instincts, the outcome could have been very different. Daniel Wu is remembered by his family in fragments: photos, old messages, stories shared quietly at home. Lena Zhao will spend most of her remaining adult life behind prison walls, known not by her online persona, but by an inmate number. And somewhere a child grows up carrying a story they did not choose, shaped by decisions made in secrecy, desperation, and violence. Some cases end when the gavel falls. Others continue long after the courtroom empties. This was one of them.